Have you ever looked at a map, and seen all those different countries and cultures and wondered, like, what stories are hidden in their past? What connections are there? It's like we see the countries and the borders now, but what about the invisible threads that tie them all together?
Absolutely. It makes you realize history isn't just about what's written in books, it's about the people who lived it and how they moved and interacted over time.
Exactly. And that's kind of what we're doing today, right? We're going to be like pulling on one of those threads and seeing where it leads us.
A genetic thread.
Yeah, genetic threat. So we're going to be doing a deep dive into a specific genetic marker. It's the Y chromosome haplogroup C2b1a1a1.
Also known as M407 for short. Catchy. Yeah.
M407 is way easier to say. So we're going to be talking about M407 today and what it can tell us about these historical migrations and connections.
Think of it like this. M407 is a tiny clue, a genetic breadcrumb.
I like that, a breadcrumb.
And by tracing this breadcrumb, we can uncover fascinating stories about how different populations have moved and interacted over centuries.
Exactly. So, what do we know so far? Our sources have this interesting information about where this marker pops up, what it's found. And the main areas are northern China, Northeast Asia, southern China, and then all the way over to the Caspian Sea region. So, already we have a bit of a puzzle, right?
It is a puzzle. We've got these seemingly distant areas, northern China, Northeast Asia, and the Caspian Sea region, all showing a significant presence of this M407 marker.
Okay, so the goal today, the mission, is to figure out what does the current distribution of this genetic marker tell us about these big historical migrations and the connections between these different groups?
We're going to be like genetic detectives.
I love it. Okay, so as we said, the two main areas that jump out are first, northern China and Northeast Asia. Our sources highlight a strong presence of M407 among Mongol populations, especially in outer and inner Mongolia. It's a really significant marker there.
Yeah, it seems to be a key part of their genetic heritage.
And then we see it also in Manchu and other Tungistic-speaking peoples, groups like the Hezhe and the Orokin. Now, these are groups that are often found in similar areas to the Manchu, so it makes you wonder, are these shared genetics because of common ancestry or a lot of interaction between these groups historically?
It's like a tangled web, and we're trying to unravel it.
And the plot thickens. Because here's where the Khitan people come in. This was really interesting to me. Our sources mention that the Khitan, who, and this is for anyone who might not know, they were a powerful force in Northeast Asia and parts of North China centuries ago. They established the Liao dynasty, so the sources suggest they might have also carried M407.
If that's the case, that could explain a lot.
It could. It could explain why we see M407 in some later populations in those same areas. We're talking some northern Han Chinese groups in places like Hebei, Shaanxi, Henan, and the
It's
Northeast.
like a ripple effect through time.
Yeah. So just to sum up what we've got so far in northern and northeastern Asia, it seems like there's a strong link between the presence of M407 and the nomadic and semi-nomadic peoples who lived in places like the Mongolian Plateau and the Liao River Basin.
It's a genetic signature tied to those ancient ways of life and the movement of people across vast landscapes.
Okay. Now let's shift gears a bit. Let's move south to southern China. Here, the picture is more complex, but our sources offer some really interesting possible explanations for the presence of M407 in this region. First, they talk about the Hakka people.
Now, the Hakka have a fascinating history. They are known for their migrations, and our sources suggest they might have brought M407 south with them during these movements.
Exactly. So the theory is because the Hakka have ancestry connected to northern Han populations, and remember, we just talked about how M407 is found in some northern Han groups, they might have carried this marker south, particularly during their migrations from central China, which happened a lot after the Tang dynasty.
The Tang dynasty was a pivotal period in Chinese history, a time of great cultural and economic growth. It's no surprise that it led to significant population movements.
And it wasn't just the Hakka. The sources also propose that groups like the Zhuang, Dong, Yao, and the Inerj, she might have acquired M407 because they absorbed people from the north during these major migration waves throughout history.
It's a reminder that migration isn't just about moving from one place to another. It's about the blending of cultures and genes.
It really is. And of course, we can't forget about the impact of armies and military movements. The sources point out that during periods like the Southern Song, Yuan, and Ming dynasties, there were these huge military and civilian migrations from north to south. That definitely could have played a role in spreading Y chromosomes like M407 around.
Those military campaigns and the movements of people they triggered, they left a lasting mark on the genetic landscape.
All right, so we've covered northern and northeastern Asia, southern China. Now, let's hop over to that other area of high M407 concentration, the Caspian Sea region. Our sources point to the 13th century Mongol conquests as a potential explanation.
Ah, yes, the Mongols.
Yeah.
Their impact was felt far and wide.
Exactly. And the sources explain that these conquests weren't just about armies sweeping through, they also triggered huge population movements. Mongol soldiers and tribes migrated westward, settling in and mixing with local populations in places like Central Asia, Iran, and around the Caspian Sea.
It's like a massive genetic mixing bowl.
It is. So that intermingling could explain why we see a higher proportion of M407 in that region today. And it's reflected in some of the Turkic people who live there, like the Kazakhs, the Uzbeks, the Turkmen. Our sources even suggest that parts of Iran might have been influenced by these Mongol genetic contributions, including M407.
It's fascinating, isn't it? Even Turkic groups that might not have originally carried M407 could have seen an increase in its frequency simply because of intermarriage and all the population mixing during that time.
Right. It's like history written in our DNA. But here's where things get even more interesting, and this is where I really started scratching my head. So we've got M407 in the Mongol heartland, and then again all the way over by the Caspian Sea. But guess what? Our sources point out that it's either absent or much less frequent in the territory that used to be controlled by the Golden Horde.
The Golden Horde was a powerful Mongol successor state that ruled over a huge chunk of land. It included the Volga River, the Kazakh steppe, and the Ural Mountains.
Right, a huge area. And that's what's so weird. If the westward movement of M407 was mainly because of the Mongols going west, why wouldn't we see it in the heart of their own successor state? What happened there?
It's a great question, and it leads us to a very intriguing alternative theory.
Get me with it.
Okay, ready for this? The sources suggest that the westward spread of M407 might not be primarily due to the Mongols in the 13th century. They say it could actually be linked to a much earlier power, the Khazar Khaganate.
The Khazar Khaganate. See, this is why I love doing this deep dive. I learn about stuff I never even heard of. Tell me about these Khazars. Who were they?
So the Khazars were a Turkic group who established a pretty impressive state after the Western Turkic Khaganate broke up. They controlled a vast area, including the Volga River, the North Caspian Sea, the Caucasus, and even parts of the Ukrainian steppes.
Wow, so they were around from like the 7th to the 10th centuries, right? But how would they be connected to M407?
Well, there are a few possibilities. One is that M407 might have come from even further east. Remember, the Khazars had ties to remnants of older nomadic empires, like the Ruran and earlier Turkic Khaganates.
Right, so it's possible these earlier groups had M407 and it kind of got passed along.
Exactly. It might have already been moving westward before the Mongol Empire even came into the picture. And there's another interesting theory. Some scholars believe that the Khazar ruling elite had links to groups from the East Asian or Mongolian steppes, groups like the Gaoshur or the Shiwei.
And these groups were connected to later ones like the Khitan and even the Mongols, right?
Exactly. So if the Khazar elite had those East Asian connections, they might have brought M407 with them, which could explain why we see it in the Caspian Sea region even before the Mongol conquests.
Okay, that makes sense. And then there's what happened after the Khazar Khaganate fell apart,
Uh,
right, in the 10th century.
Right. After the Khazar state collapsed, their nobles and warriors scattered, and as they migrated, they could have spread M407 further, contributing to the frequency we see in that region today.
So we've got these possible links to the Khazars, but we still haven't solved the mystery of that Golden Horde gap. Why wouldn't we see a high frequency of M407 there if it was already present in the region?
Well, our sources offer some explanations for that too. The first has to do with something called Turkicization.
Turkicization, break that down for me.
So, although the Golden Horde started as a Mongol state, the leaders and the people quickly adopted Turkic languages and culture. They mixed a lot with the local Turkic populations, groups like the Kipchak Kumans who had their own set of genetic markers.
And those markers were different from M407, right?
Exactly. They were things like R1A, Q, and J2. So any M407 that came with the Mongols might have been diluted over time.
Basically, the local genetics were just more dominant.
You got it. Another possible reason is that the Golden Horde ruled differently than some other Mongol states. In places like Persia, the Mongol rulers intermarried more with the local people.
But the Golden Horde didn't do that as much.
Right. Their rule over the Turkic population was a little looser, with less intermarriage. So there might have been less opportunity for M407 to spread among the elites.
Interesting. Different styles of rule lead to different genetic outcomes. It makes you wonder how those different approaches to power played out on a personal level. how those relationships between rulers and the ruled shaped the future.
It really makes you think. And
Yeah.
then, of course, there are the events that happened after the Golden Horde.
Right, like Timur's invasions in the 14th century. That must have shaken things up.
They did. And then you have the rise of the Moscow Principality, which also led to a lot of population movement. Some Mongol nobles might have left the Golden Horde territory, heading south or back east.
So all those migrations could have further muddied the genetic waters, so to speak. And when we consider all this evidence, the picture becomes pretty clear, doesn't it?
It does. The geographic distribution of M407,
Hmm.
with those high frequencies in the Mongol Plateau and by the Caspian Sea, but that dip in the Golden Horde area points towards something really interesting.
It suggests that M407 probably moved west with the Khazars, or even earlier Turkic influences, rather than being solely a result of the Mongols. It's like a whisper of a forgotten empire hidden in our genes.
It really makes you rethink those historical narratives, doesn't it? The
Yeah.
Mongols get a lot of attention, but groups like the Khazars might have been just as influential, at least in terms of their genetic legacy.
Absolutely. And it's all thanks to this one tiny genetic marker, M407. It's giving us a glimpse into the past, into the movements and interactions of people who lived centuries ago. It's like a time machine.
And it raises so many questions. If we can learn this much from just one marker, imagine what other stories are hidden in our DNA.
So many questions. Like, what other seemingly obvious historical assumptions might we need to re-examine? What other population patterns are out there with hidden stories just waiting to be uncovered? This deep dive has really opened my eyes to the power of genetics and how it can illuminate history. It's a reminder that the past is never truly past. It's alive in our genes, shaping who we are today. And who knows what other secrets we might find as we keep digging.